So I think we're ready to start. Is that right? Yep. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to thank Eric Ashmond, and also to introduce him. He actually, you can see Zach in the background. He is the father, most importantly to us, he is the father of Zach, who is a very active 8-year-old in our infant program. He also, in his secondary role in life, he works for Edward Jones as a financial advisor, and he's going to share some of the important saving strategies for college. He'll talk to us about financial aid, about college saving plans, and you know, and I speak from experience, believe me, college will come more quickly than you ever expected. So with much less ado, let me hand over to Eric and have him give us some of his expertise on this somewhat troubling part of having children. Thank you, Eric.
Well, thank you very much, Ann, and thank you for having me. Hi, everybody. My name is Eric Ashmont, and as Ann said, I live in Rockville with my wife, Carrie, our dog, Elsie, and the little guy back there, soon to be 8 months old, Zachary. He's in the infant wing, and he is looked after by the wonderful Miss Mirabelle, Miss Carolina, Miss Andy, and they're just three of the many wonderful people that are working for us and taking care of our kids and looking after them at ECDC. So, everybody got cameras off right now, but just go ahead and do a round of applause at home for the folks at ECDC who are taking care of all of our kids day in and day out. Now, like Ann said, I work for Edward Jones. I am not the federal employee. That's my wife, Carrie. She works for NIBIB, so the Biomedical Imaging and Bioengineering branch of the NIH. And I just want to say one thing for those of you who think that, the financial planning and saving for college and retirement or estate legacy planning can be a daunting and intimidating feat. Try being a non-government employee and being around all government employees when you get together at gatherings with your friends and they speak in nothing but what are they, TLAs, I think, that, it's just as intimidating for us outsiders as well. So we each have a commonality there. A little bit about me, I'm on the board for two wonderful organizations here in the community. One is called Ryan's Place. We do a lot of work helping folks with disabilities get services and get fitted for equipment, especially when they age out of state-sponsored programs, or if some folks just can't afford the services or equipment, we try and help in that capacity. I'm also on the board in the executive committee for the Gaithersburg Germantown Chamber of Commerce. So doing a lot of work in the Up County with business development and supporting the community as well. Love taking Zach on adventures. We frequent breweries in Montgomery County pretty regularly. Love music. That can always have the Beatles on in the background. It's a good day. And I am an avid shuffler. For those of you not familiar about shuffling, that is not quite running, not quite jogging, but shuffling, going on the same paths these folks go on, but just much slower. I play pickleball and I golf. And on the golf course, you'll find me probably in the woods more often than not. I like to argue that I'm getting the most that the golf course has to offer at that point by touring all over the portions of the holes. But the reason that we're here today, I'm a financial advisor with Edward Jones, and quite honestly, I have the greatest job in the world, right? I get to help people put together plans for some of the most important goals in their lives, right? Get to help them retire, get to help them send the kids to college, get to help them come up with strategies to save on taxes or set up future generations for success with some estate and legacy planning. And that the part of my work is that I enjoy the most is helping my clients meet those financial goals, right? It's an opportunity to change lives. And to accomplish that, you truly have to understand what the financial goals are. And this extends as well for folks who might be planning on their own or working with their own advisor, in the sense that you want to understand what's important to you, what are the priorities, how do things shake out. You want to come up with tailored solutions and strategies specific towards those goals, And what I love being about a financial advisor is I get to partner with people, right? It's not a transactional, here's the plan, good luck. It's being their guide, being their partner, being their educator throughout life as things change, helping them stay on track and achieve each of these goals as we're going through it. And the education piece is one of my favorite pieces, because that's where I get to share good information that people can hopefully feel empowered and feel confident from. So, and that's what I hope you get out of today's webinar. We're going to talk about college, getting there from here. So I'm going to go ahead and just walk us through what we can expect to cover today. So as you can see, we're knocking off the welcome already, so that's a big check mark. Well done for us. We'll talk about the key steps to financial success. We'll talk about the cost of college, financial aid, savings strategies, the different college savings plans that are available out there. And then we'll address some common college savings questions. Try saying that 3 times fast. And so then after that, we can open up the floor for some Q&A. And if we have time, I can walk you through some tools and give you some tips and insight to that. So this webinar should run for about 30 minutes with some Q&A at the end, and I want to be respectful of people's time. So if we could hold the questions to the end of the webinar, that way I can make sure we cover all the material, and folks that need to hop off the call can hop off, folks that have some questions can stay on, and I'll also put up my contact info there at the end. So if you have further questions, you can reach out, and we'll also be getting you some additional materials and resources that you can use on your own if you're going through and doing some planning and you want to learn. So we'll start with the keys for financial success, right? This webinar is designed to help you become a more educated investor and to assist you on your path towards reaching your unique goals. And as unique as each goal will be, the path, we believe, really remains the same. So to have a clear outlook on your future, you should first evaluate, where are you today, right? If you don't know where you are, how can you gauge where you're going to go, right? It's tough to plan a road trip if you don't know where on the map you're starting out. But then you can set clear and measurable goals for where you want to be. What are your wants? What are your needs? What are your concerns? What's important to you? What are your priorities, right? How do they all fit? How do you match those two together? Once you determine the goals, then you can determine, okay, well, are they realistic based on where you are today and based on the time horizon and the investments and the strategies that you're comfortable with? What I love helping folks do is decide, okay, these are the tools and strategies that can help you reach your goals. And the more you know about tools and strategies that are available to you, the more you feel empowered, the more you'll understand where your money's going and what it's doing for you. And then lastly, staying on track, evaluate where you are on an annual basis, right? Whether you've reached your goals or what new goals you'd like to achieve. Is your current strategy working for you, or are there adjustments that you can make? The path we have mapped out on this slide is really a strategy to help you reach long-term financial goals. And this seminar is going to help provide information on the tools and the strategies that are available to assist you in reaching your college savings goals, your education savings goals. There we go. So let's talk about the cost of college. We all know college is expensive, and the cost continues to grow each year. For the 2020-2021 school year, annual education costs for tuition and room and board are estimated to be about $22,200 at public universities and $50,800 at private universities. Now, so where your child chooses to go to school and whether the degree requires postgraduate work can greatly impact your savings goals. And deciding how much of the expense that you want to cover is really the first step in deciding and developing a strategy to help pay for college. For example, your saving strategy is going to look a whole lot different if your goal is to pay for all of the college expenses rather than pay for maybe just half of them. And this cost can seem overwhelming, right? That's why it's so important to have a strategy. And by being here today, whether you know it or not, you're already taking great steps. So I want you to give yourself a pat on the back, give yourself some kudos. And while these numbers can seem daunting, having the knowledge to tackle these costs can help empower you to take steps in the right direction. Now, while financial aid can help with these costs, and we'll discuss that in just a moment, essentially there are 2 ways that you can pay for higher education when it boils down to it, right? It's going to be saving or borrowing. And as you can see from this graphic, it's often less expensive in the long run to save rather than to borrow. You can see in our example, saving $35,000 versus borrowing $35,000. If you put $200 a month away for every month for 10 years and you're able to get a 7% rate of return, you're contributing 24,000, you've earned 11,000, that's your 35, and you only cost you 200 a month versus borrowing. You borrow that 35,000, you got to pay it back at a 5% interest rate, pay it off every month for 10 years. So you've got your 35,000, but you also have $9,650 in interest, right? So that total cost is $375. So comparatively, it's cheaper to save than to borrow. And the biggest takeaway in any long-term financial planning goal is really that time and discipline are going to be your greatest allies, especially when you're creating a college savings strategy, right? Investing a set amount of money each month may seem challenging, but doing it is going to make a significant impact on reaching your family's goals. And contributing to college savings plans now have the potential to save your family money when you consider saving versus borrowing for college. So we'll talk about specific saving strategies in a few minutes, but let's start by talking a bit about financial aid. And it's important to point out that not all financial aid is a gift, right? In other words, financial aid comes in a few forms. It can be grants, it can be work study, it can be scholarships, it can be loans. Some of the most attractive forms of financial aid are going to be those grants, the work studies, and the scholarships because they don't have to be repaid. Loans, of course, as we all know, do. Grants and work study are given out largely based on financial need, while scholarships are awarded based on a student's merit or maybe other criteria. And now the financial aid office at your local university can be a wealth of information, local community college, or even if you have a school that you're an alumni of, reach out to that financial aid office and they can provide you with some additional info in that realm as well. Now, people often worry about their savings having a negative impact on scholarship potential, but that shouldn't be a concern. No amount saved is going to stand between a student and a merit scholarship, right? So whether it's academic or athletic, for example. And it's worth pointing out that grants, work study, and scholarships don't typically offer a full ride or an all expenses paid position in many cases, right? These options cover only a portion of the costs associated with higher education. So it's a wise plan to put a strategy in place in the event that you don't you want to cover all of the expected education costs, right? And as you can see, student aid comes from several sources. It can come from the federal government, it can come from different institutions, it can come from employers, it can come from states. And even so, a large portion of the financial aid pie consists of loans, which once again, those need to be paid, right? So the best way that you can help your child, or if there's some grandparents that have popped on with family members today, help your child or grandchild graduate with low or no debt is to build up that savings before they go to school. It's really similar to saving for retirement. I mean, that's something we're all doing, right? Although with retirement, you have a Social Security and a pension. Most of your retirement income is likely going to come from your personal savings and your investments. And the same is true with college. Although grants and scholarships and loans may be available, your savings is likely going to be the most important piece of the plan. And it's worth pointing out that it's less expensive over the long run to save than to borrow, as we saw in that slide just a few back. So the important thing is really to start saving. Right? The best day to start saving is always yesterday, right? Even if it's not as much as you'd like, start. And here are a few simple strategies that can help you do that. So 1, start today. 2, invest regularly. And 3, take advantage of tax-free growth potential. I just realized I held up 4 fingers for 3. The coffee's worn off. But if you're like most people, you have many competing demands for your dollars, right? House payments, car payments, your retirement. And so the question is, okay, well, how do you fit college savings into that budget? And understandably, you're not just saving for education in isolation. You have many goals that you're trying to achieve. That may include your own retirement. Many families are having kids later in life, and that can mean that children are reaching college age at the same time their parents are thinking about retirement. So the question then becomes, okay, well, how do we balance all of these important goals with limited resources? And there may be trade-offs. You may need to save more. You may need to retire later. You may need to provide less for education. You can choose any of the options, and it's really based on what's important to you and how you prioritize these goals. One strategy, though, to avoid is to delay saving for retirement in favor of education. That could put your retirement goal in education terms in detention. And I love the fact that I have an 8-month-old child because I can make dad jokes now with no penalty. But time is a very valuable asset. I've said it a little earlier in this talk. So don't delay saving for one goal over the other. View them together, right? They're in unison. There's going to be trade-offs. And by understanding how your goals interact, you can work to make sure that you don't inadvertently derail one when saving for the other. A common concern I hear from parents in this arena, with these two goals is, well, I don't want my children to have the burden of student loans when they get out of college. And so I want to focus all my efforts there. And that's very honorable. That's wonderful that you care for your kids in that sense and that capacity. But if you're focusing all your effort onto making sure they don't have student loans and you haven't paid much attention to the retirement picture, what's going to be the greater burden? Your child having some student loans and maybe you help them pay for it on the back end, or you not having anything set aside for yourself for retirement and ending up having to move in with the kids when it's time to retire because they're going to need to take care of you at that point. So it's really just, again, prioritizing and looking at them in use. So our first strategy is to start saving as soon as possible, right? Start today. The earlier you start saving, the more time your money has to grow. And over time, a little can go a long way. So you can start with as little as $25 a month, right? If you're eligible for a state tax deduction or a credit, your contribution may not even cost you that much. But if we look at the hypothetical example, if you started investing $50 a month, right, when your child was born, you can have more than $21,000 saved for college when your child is 18. If it was $100 a month, it's over $43,000. If it was $200 a month, it's over $86,000. And that's wonderful, right? The time value of money. But what if your child is 13? This is a common question I get. Is it too late to save if my child's a teenager? And the answer is no. Even if you have only a few years to save or invest, you can still make a meaningful contribution if you put away as much as you can. If you put away $200 a month for 5 years, you could hypothetically accumulate more than $14,000, right? So every dollar you save is one less dollar that your child is going to have to borrow or earn with a scholarship, is another way to reframe that thinking. Our second strategy and tip, right? Invest regularly. So if you start saving with a manageable amount, you're more likely to stay disciplined with your contributions. So maybe you don't have to do it alone, right? Do you have family members or friends who might want to help? They can contribute up to $15,000 a year per individual without exceeding the annual gift tax exclusion. Another piece of strategy that I share with my clients, for many parents, daycare costs are reduced when your son or daughter reaches age 5, and typically they enroll in school for full days. We recommend that parents put some or all of that extra money aside to save towards college costs. And the same is true of any unplanned money, right? Consider contributing a portion of bonuses or tax refunds or raises towards this goal as well. And number 3, the third strategy here we're going to touch on, taking advantage of tax-free growth potential, right? Certain types of accounts allow federally tax-free growth of earnings while the account is invested. And the longer you can delay paying taxes, the better your potential to accumulate more savings is. And so with certain types of accounts, you can also take advantage of tax-free withdrawals at the federal level for qualified education expenses. And so some of the ways you can do that in terms of saving for higher education, we'll take a look at 2 of them, are custodial accounts and 529 plans. And so we'll look at each of them in terms of who can contribute, how the distributions can be used, who controls them, the contribution limits, and their tax treatment. And so we'll start with custodial accounts. A custodial account is an investment account, and anyone, regardless of age or income, can contribute to a custodial account. So it could be parents, it could be grandparents, it could be aunts, uncles, family, friends. The distributions must be used for the benefit of the child but they don't necessarily have to be used towards educational expenses, right? The minor in a custodial account, so the child who you have it set up for, they gain full control of the account when he or she reaches the age of majority, which, depending on the state that you're residing in, can either be 18 or 21. And now, depending on your wishes for these funds, this may or may not be the level of control over the account you desire. And just a good exercise for illustration, let's all think back to how we were at age 18. And let's say our parents did a great job putting some money away in a custodial account. Maybe it's 10, maybe it's $20,000, maybe it's more. Should 18-year-old us have access to that type of cash reserve, or maybe should we look at it in a different way, right? Just some food for thought. But while there are no contribution limits for custodial accounts, there may be gift tax consequences if folks contribute over $15,000 per beneficiary per contributor per year. And in terms of tax treatment, a portion of the income, it may be offset by a standard deduction. Some of the income tax, though, the income may be taxed at the beneficiary or the parent's tax rate. So when it's diving into the realm of taxes, we always recommend consulting your qualified tax professional, your CPA, and looping them in joint sessions in coming up with the strategy, coming up with the plan with your financial advisor, if the custodial account is an option that you're considering. When we look at the other side of the coin on the 529 plan, the 529 plan is a state-sponsored savings plan designed to help you save for future education expenses, right? So the account owner remains in control of the account for the life of the account. The beneficiary, right, your child, never gains control of these assets unless the account owner changes the owner designation. So that's a very important point. An owner of the 529 plan, you control the funds and you can change the beneficiary to another eligible family member at any point in time. And you also control how the funds are invested and how the funds are distributed. And many 529 plans that are out there, they allow you to choose from a range of professionally managed portfolios. 529 plans, they have generous contribution guidelines, right? So you can contribute up to the $15,000 per year per beneficiary without exceeding the annual gift tax exclusion. Another way to contribute more than the annual exclusion without triggering any gift tax consequences, maybe through what's known as accelerated gifting. And so 529 plans have special gifting provisions that allows you to contribute 5 years worth of annual gift tax exclusions or $75,000 per beneficiary in a single year. And you can look at that as a married couple could combine their contributions for a total of $150,000 to each child they have in 1 year, right? But because tax issues for 529 plans can be complex, again, always a good idea when in the realm of taxes and trying to do forward-thinking tax planning to loop in your qualified tax professional, your CPA, especially if it's going to be part of a gifting strategy. But the earnings of a 529 plan, they accumulate federally tax-free. The more you contribute, the more important tax-free compounding becomes. In addition, in some cases, contributions are eligible for a state tax deduction or a credit as well. And withdrawals for qualified elementary or secondary tuition expenses and higher education expenses are federally tax-free. So what I mean by qualified higher education expenses, those include tuition and fees, room and board, and that's also off-campus housing to an amount that's equivalent to what it would cost to live on campus. Books and supplies, computers and computer equipment, printers, internet access, anything related to educational computer software, with the asterisk, as long as the primary user is going to be the beneficiary, your child, during that time frame. So mom and dad don't look at that like, this is a great time to revamp the computer and the printer setup at home, especially if your kid's going off to college. What I mean by qualified primary and secondary expenses, those are, potentially, elementary or high school expenses. Those could be up to about $10,000 per year per beneficiary. Some states and state 529 plans may also recognize certain elementary and secondary tuition expenses or registered apprenticeships and even student loan repayments as a qualified expense. But before using 529 funds for a certain qualified expense, make sure you check with the plan sponsor or your qualified tax professional to avoid incurring any potential state tax consequences or penalties. And another good reference too for IRS guidelines, if you're not using a CPA and you're going it alone, publication 970 can be found on the IRS website at irs.gov. Now, before we wrap things up and open up the floor to Q&A, I'm going to share some of the most common questions I get about saving for college. And keep in mind, these answers here pertain to current laws. And it's possible over the next 5, 10 to 15 years that tax and financial aid or other laws could change. Like perfect example, the Secure Act 2.0 has impacted 529 plans in a good way. And we'll touch on that in one of these questions. But the most common question that I get is, can I use 529 plans for a college outside my state? So I live in Maryland. I opened the Maryland State 529 plan. My child goes to college in California. Can I use those funds from the plan for that college? And the answer is yes. Regardless of the 529 plan that you choose to invest in, you can use the money for qualified expenses at accredited institutions, whether it be public or private across the country, and even some schools abroad. These institutions include most four-year colleges and universities and many two-year community and vocational schools as well. Next question, if my child does not go to college, they decide, okay, they're not going to college, will I lose the savings in my 529 plan? And so you have some options, and this is where the Secure Act 2.0 also comes into play, right? So if you have options, if your child doesn't go to college, you can change the account beneficiary to another qualified family member, as we talked about before, or you can take what's called a non-qualified withdrawal. And so if funds are used for anything than qualified expenses, right, college, tuition, the books, room and board, everything we just touched on, the portion of the distribution that represents the earnings will be subject to ordinary income tax, plus a 10% federal penalty. Now, where the Secure Act 2.0 kicks in, the intent of this change was to remove a barrier for education savings by providing greater flexibility for 529 assets if they're not needed for education expenses. And so with this provision, starting in 2024, 529 account owners can roll over unused 529 assets into a Roth IRA for the beneficiary of that 529 plan. Now, it's subject to certain criteria and limitations. There's a lifetime limit of $35,000 per beneficiary. The beneficiary must have taxable compensation as well. So that makes sense, though, if they're approaching adulthood or young adulthood and they're out there working, they should have taxable compensation. And another provision is that the plan must be opened for at least 15 years before taking that distribution to be rolled over into the Roth IRA. But if you're thinking about, okay, well, our kids are young right now, and having a 529 plan open for 15 years isn't that daunting of a task. We're still awaiting further regulatory guidance on this, but in short, it's a change for the better and offering more flexibility. And remember, eligible family members, if you are changing the beneficiary, siblings, children, nieces, nephews, parents, children, spouses, or other relatives like first cousins. Another strategy that I like to share, if parents are expecting, or you know people who are expecting and they want to get a jump on the savings, you can start saving in a 529 plan prior to the birth of your child by naming a beneficiary other than that child. And so, for example, I'll use myself and little Zach back there. So when Carrie was pregnant with him, I opened a 529 plan. I was the beneficiary. And then when Zach was born and had a social security number, we went ahead and we changed Zach to be the beneficiary. So we got an extra year of putting cash to work and getting some tax-free growth in a 529 plan. One note, though, in the custodial accounts, while they don't have to be used for education expense, they must be used for the benefit of the child in some capacity. And if you wanted to have savings for both education and other expenses, it may make sense to put some of your savings in the custodial account, some of the 529. Again, looking at the bigger picture and the part of your plan, how it all fits together. Another common question, will saving for college lessen my child's chance of qualifying for financial aid? So student and parental assets and income are what are considered when applying for financial aid. And so 529 plans are considered the assets of the parents, which are an advantage over saving in the student's name, such as with custodial accounts. Assets in the student's name count more against them in the FAFSA calculation. So make sure you discuss potential financial aid impacts with your financial advisor, with financial aid professionals. Another thing worth noting is that 529 accounts held by grandparents, the assets in that account do not count against you on the FAFSA application. The distributions do, and there's a 2-year look back in distributions. But if you think of it this way, if grandma and grandpa are socking some money away for college, that those dollars aren't looked at in the FAFSA application. And if you wait 2 years, say junior year of college, to start taking distributions from that account, by the time the 2-year look back kicks in, odds are the child has graduated college, or they're going on to grad school, or they may be getting some additional resources and support there. So just a call out, food for thought piece. And lastly, if my child gets a scholarship, will I pay a penalty on my 529 plan savings? Well, first of all, if your child gets a scholarship, congratulations, right? That's something to celebrate, not dread. And an account owner can withdraw from a 529 plan the equivalent dollar for dollar, right, of a scholarship awarded to the plan's beneficiary without triggering that 10% federal penalty, which is normally associated with the non-qualified withdrawals. But the withdrawals, when they're made because of a scholarship, sometimes the portion of the distribution that represents the earnings can be subject to ordinary income tax. And lastly, the last question we have here, should I use a Roth IRA to save for college? And it may seem like an attractive idea, right? Save in one vehicle with the potential to use it for either college or retirement, but it may not be the best strategy. The Roth IRAs, they have income and contribution limits, and the priority of a Roth IRA, those contributions really should be for retirement. I'm a firm believer in mental accounting and truly separating the money being saved for each of those goals, right? Specifically, 2 large important goals like college and retirement. And after you determine your role in providing for education, we can then work, okay, let's figure out how much we need to save each month to help you get there. And again, there's going to be trade-offs, right? As with any decision in life, saving more, retiring later, providing less for education, you can choose any of those options based on what's important to you and really how you prioritize your goals. And as I stated earlier, time is very, very valuable. So don't delay saving for one goal over the other. Instead, try and view them together, right? By understanding how your goals interact, you can work to make sure that you don't inadvertently derail one when saving for the other. If you think back to the 5 steps we talked about, where are you today? What are you doing, right? What are your goals? Where do you want to be tomorrow? What are your wants? What are your needs? What are your concerns? What's important to you? What's your priority? And then how do those match up? If they align and you're on track, great. How can you enhance that, solidify it? If they're not, what are some things you can do to improve that picture? And then stay on track, review it annually. So before we open it up to Q&A, we covered a lot today. And I just want to rehash a couple of things for you to get some key takeaways here. So college education is more important today than ever, but it's also more expensive than ever. And that's why it's important to plan and set a realistic savings goal. So here are a few questions to consider as you establish that goal. Will your child go to a public or private college? Is it going to be in-state or is it out of state? How much of the expense do you want to cover? How much financial aid do you expect to receive? Do you have family members or friends who want to help? Although financial aid and contribution from friends and family may help with college costs, your personal savings is likely going to play the most important role in your child's college fund. Since you may already be saving for retirement, which hopefully we all are, emergencies and other financial goals, in addition to saving for education, it's important to develop that strategy that takes all of those factors into account in your plan, right? And so a few tips that can help you do that are start today. If you don't have a plan, start looking at planning, start figuring all that out, invest regularly, and take advantage of tax-free growth potential, such as in 529 savings plans, right? So using these simple strategies, they can have a significant impact over time. Now, at this point in time, before we open it up to Q&A, I'll leave this slide up here for 10 seconds, and then I'll take my screen down so I can see people, because I'm kind of isolated in this box right now. But if you want to take a picture with your cell phone, there's my contact information, my email address, my office line here. And if you have questions, feel free. I'm a resource. I'm part of the ECDC community. I'm part of the Montgomery County community. My goal is to help people. So if you have a question, if you forget it today and you want to talk about it tomorrow, shoot me an email, give me a phone call. If you have more advanced questions, you don't want to ask it on a Zoom call, feel free to reach out. Personally, we can always set up some time to do a virtual coffee or get together, have some coffee and have a conversation. Happy to be a resource. So I'll give you a 5-second countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Take a sip of water for dramatic pause. Okay. And so we'll go ahead and stop the sharing there. And if there are any questions, I don't know if folks unmute themselves, or Ann, if you unmute them. Let's see, let me go through the meeting chat here. Can you change to self or other family members to take allowable classes? How is a custodial account different from other savings accounts? So in a 529, you can change the beneficiary and as long as, again, it's for accredited, college, primary or secondary education purposes, expenses there. So you can change the beneficiary, then use it for that beneficiary to take those classes. In a custodial account, the dollars don't necessarily have to go towards educational expenses, like we said, but they do have to be used for the benefit of that beneficiary, and you can't change the beneficiary of that custodial account. Let's see, we said these are for your costs going back. Oh, that must be from one of the slides with the costs on it. Yes, so those are the estimated costs and forecast are projected being forward. Since I'm not seeing hands or questions come through, one thing I will share with you, just to so you can kind of see what it looks like as an example. When we have these conversations with folks, these consultations, these are no cost, there's no obligation. It's helping folks get information. But this is if Carrie and I were to have child number 2, we're very content with young Zach here at 8 months. He's still getting the whole sleep thing down there. So side note, if anybody on this Zoom call is a sleep wizard, I would love to subscribe to your newsletters. But what we can do here is we can say, okay, do we know a specific school the second kid wants to attend, or do we want to use national averages? And let's just use, say, we could say my alma mater. I'm a Marist Red Fox. I went to school in Poughkeepsie, New York, for college. So we'll look in, we'll say New York, and a lot of you are saying Marist. I've never heard of it, and it's a very small school. But the cool thing about this database is that we have all of the schools. So there it is. There's Marist. The kid would be an out of state, probably do tuition, room, and board. So there you go. The annual cost, $60,820. Then when we go and we say, okay, let's take a look at what we would do to get there. We have a long time horizon, so we can go for growth focus. This is based off the risk tolerance for you and your spouse, whoever's involved in planning. And then when we say, okay, well, let's take a look, let's proceed, let's see how this goes. Back and do that again. The suspense is killing me. So there's Marist. Add that school. Let's go to the results. And we can add multiple schools if you want to do a side-by-side comparison. But let's say, we don't, this second child for Carrie and myself does not exist yet. So let's say, okay, let's figure out how much we would need to do in a 529 account to get us to our goal. And so if we saved $1,337 a month, that would be able to help us fund this education savings goal on track. The probability of success plays in there a little low depending on market conditions, but the proposed ending balance is pretty low. You could say, okay, we'll do more. We want to do $1,500 a month, not $15,000. What does that change our picture to in terms of saving for our goals? So that increases the probability of success. It also leaves a little bit more money. So again, that's where maybe that rollover to a Roth might come into play, or changing the beneficiary on the account, depending on needs, wants, and desires. So again, if you have questions or you want to go through that yourself, feel free to reach out. We also will be providing resources. I can get those to Ann and she can get them out to people, or we can put some hard copy stuff in the lobby there, maybe at ECDC. But if there are no additional questions, I do see a hand up. Ryan, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess wanted to go back, because that's one thing you mentioned was something I've been thinking about too, like the prospect of a scholarship versus a penalty. for having like significant funds in a 529 that you can't use for educational expenses. Generally, like, there will be exceptions, but the general rule of thumb is to assume no scholarship and plan for 529 contributions, that the penalty would not ever outweigh a scholarship.
So yeah, I would say, in terms of, I think everybody likes to think that their kids are gonna, go full ride somewhere, or at least get some help in some capacity. But I would say focusing on, especially from a long-term planning perspective, the things that you can control, you may not be able to control whether or not that scholarship becomes a reality later in life. But you can control your ability to save and grow those funds. And to the point of where, if the child does get the scholarship, you can withdraw money from the 529 plan on a dollar for dollar basis. You avoid that 10% penalty. You may have to pay a little bit of ordinary income tax on it, depending on what portion comes out in with the earnings. But yeah, it's always better to save, just because if you haven't saved and you got there and the scholarship doesn't become a reality, then we're looking at borrowing, and we might be paying more in the long term. But great question. And a question from the chat: can a custodial account be a stock portfolio? Yeah, you can hold a variety of investments. Typically, they need to be invested within the best interest of the child who the account is set up for in the custodial account. Again, those funds need to be used for them, so the dollar should be invested with their best interests in mind as well. But you can hold investments in their stocks, mutual funds, bonds, CDs, exchange traded funds. Absolutely. Great questions. If we do not have anything else, Anne, I will turn this back over to you to wrap things up. But again, Eric Ashmont, financial advisor with Edward Jones, want to thank everybody for joining us today, and safe and healthy wishes. Thanks for being here. And now go pick up your kids from daycare. So folks can go home.
We close at 6. We're still closing at 6. All right. Eric, thank you so much. I think this was a really great overview for us. And you're very entertaining too. No surprises. At any rate, we would like to have some information in the lobby, and then as well, people should stop by if they will. We are recording this, so you can review it again, and we'll make sure that our parents, the rest of the parents who didn't come to this session, see what you have to offer as well. But I'm a grandparent, I think. It was really, really very helpful. So thank you.
Absolutely. I just threw my email in the chat there. So for whether folks are here in real time or in video time, you can copy that, throw it in the email, and feel free to message me with any questions. But yeah, I'll get those materials. They'll be waiting in the lobby for you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, now what do I do?
Thank you.